Hello, welcome. I think we're probably live. I hope you're well. I thought that I would jump on and talk about leadership, trust in leadership. This is something which I believe we we all, well, most of us search for. Most of us want to have leaders, leadership that is trustworthy, people who we can trust. And very often, we'll talk about that and we're keen to have it. We certainly know when we don't have it, the antithesis, the slimy, the devious, the Machiavellian. We don't like that. So, what is the flip side, and what does trust consist of? So, what I wanted to do was to go over some components. Now, I've looked at over the years several papers about leadership in general and certainly trust. And I've also looked at quite a few articles, and they all tend to coalesce around the same themes. And so, what I thought I would do was to borrow from one of those articles. And up front, I would have to say that it it's not my graphic. It is absolutely not. It's something that I've constructed. I've chosen it because I think it's quite easy to read. It's quite colourful. It's quite clear, and it tends to pick out some of the main themes. Now, also important to bear in mind that what I'm going to be talking about, these headings, is me. I'm not referencing the article. The article may well say different things, may say things in a smarter way, a more cohesive way, or perhaps their take on these headings is entirely different. And that's fine. That's great, because we do need different opinions to essentially push the conversation along as we search for the truth, as we try and figure out how to get through certain things. I mean, right now, I don't know about you, but I do believe that the world is in a bit of a state, and leaders, real leaders, proper leadership, is so important right now. But so is trust in those leaders. So, to begin, then, I think you may or may not be able to see the cursor, but just in case you can't, um, I'll talk you through it anyway. So I'm talking here about authenticity. Now, authenticity, again, this is likely to be different in this article. I will put a link in the description. For me, is in many ways a combination of all of the things that we see here in this little graphic. And once you've got those things, then I believe that authenticity tends to flow from it. But if I was put on the spot and somebody said, right, okay, hold on a second though, hold on, what what are you but what are your opinions on authenticity? And what I would say is that it is about being who you are in terms of the main trait or traits of your personality, because most of us can spot a fake. So if someone's trying to be kind and considerate, but you know they're angry and you know that they don't care and there is no empathy, then I believe that most of the time it shows up. A lot of us can pick up on it because there's something not quite right. Whether it's micro expressions, whether it is non-verbal body language, and of course, often the actions that happen after the event or don't align. Someone says, "Hey, I'm really listening," and you've got months of data which tends to imply that this individual doesn't listen. And so that is not the general way of being, or a different way to put it, as I've suggested, is that this does not really reflect their true character, the main personality trait or traits. So our character, if it is a true character, will tend to show up in different situations, will often show up at its most stark when the pressure is on. Someone's true character often shows up when the pressure is on. The driving personality, the main trait or traits. Again, take your pick how you would describe that, but hopefully you get the gist of it. So being authentic is being in alignment with who we are. Now, there is an issue there immediately, you may have spotted, because it is important for leaders and those in positions of power and influence to manage emotions and also to be aware of not being emotionally hijacked in certain situations, because they need to be empathic, but they have to keep essentially an even keel. They've got to be level headed. And so it's not about saying, well, I'm angry in this situation and I'm just going to let it rip. Sometimes that happens, of course, but other times, very often, that isn't leadership, because part of being a leader is being emotionally intelligent, is being emotionally aware. However, it also throws up the other, elephant in the room. Does that mean then that some people, in terms of their core character, their main personality traits or traits, aren't fit for leadership? Yes, it does, in my opinion. So when we say being authentic, if everybody was authentic, yes, there are social niceties and norms, etc., that we all have to fit into. We have a social mask that can change in different situations, but our core, for most people, stays the same. Our character stays the same. I've used the analogy before of like the diamond. And the diamond, if you think about it, when you put a certain facet to the light, it catches the light, that shows up, but the diamond remains the same. Our character, our core, is the diamond. We can adjust our positioning to allow this part of us to show up, but we're still essentially being authentic. And so authentic, now that I've started talking about it, may deserve a deeper dive and a longer video. Well, hopefully you get the gist of that, that it is the essence of our character that can have many different facets. But if we're not really aligning to the essence of our character and it's a total facade, then it's Machiavellian, then it is lying, then it is inauthentic. I hope that makes sense. They probably say nothing about that in the article whatsoever, the way I've described it. Um, but again, read the article. I would encourage you, because it'll give you a totally different perspective on it. Then we go here to transparency. Now, I've already alluded to that. I've already touched on that, in the sense that being authentic, in my opinion, is showing up as our true self, as our character. But sometimes on top of that, that isn't enough, because we have to make sure that we are pushing transparency. In other words, we thinking about, okay, how does this look to someone? Was it obfuscated? Was it muddy? Was it unclear? Was this opaque in some way? How can I make it clearer? How can I make what I'm doing and saying and thinking and why I reached this decision as clear as possible? And so it is, I mean, all these facets here that in this little model are all connected, as I've said. And I've also suggested that truly authentic requires, if not all of them, a lot of them. And so being transparent is part of that. But think of what I've said so far in relationship to the leaders that you see around. How many of these leaders are actually authentic? Are we really getting their character? Now, the interesting thing is there may be leaders out there who you disagree with, you don't like, but perhaps you've noticed that there is a grudging sort of, if not respect, acceptance of the fact that hey, they are different, and I don't agree with them, but I believe they're being who they are. They're being true to their character, which is why that is important. And so, who do we see out there that is actually authentic? And who do we see? Which leaders or leadership groups do we see being transparent? And again, you can think about your business, the community, sport, and of course, the business leaders who are the world names, and also politicians, councillors, people in the eye of the media, those people who are often so-called world leaders, tending to be the heads or deputies of countries, and of course big corporations. So what's up next? Communication. How important is it to communicate? How important is it to communicate regularly? How important is it to communicate clearly? So again, if it's in alignment with character and it is transparent, then that would tend to be good communication. There are all the other things that a lot of the handbooks, etc., will put in: timely, measured in time, also. So meaning that if somebody gets the news 6 months after the event, then that's a little bit too late. We need the news before that. Also, we need things in sequence. We need things that there is a regular output. People tend to like that. They tend to like the predictability of, I'm going to hear about this now, and I'm going to hear about it in a week's time, or 4 weeks' time, or tomorrow. And so communication is key. Do you feel like you're being communicated to by leaders that you know, leaders that you can think about? Is that something that you would say you see and hear? Or is it ad hoc? Or is the communication timely and regular, but you don't believe what you're being told because it isn't transparent and the individual isn't being authentic? So what have we got up next? Well, integrity. Now, like I say, a lot of these things are connected. So, integrity we have there is the best way, in my opinion, to describe integrity is to use the old sort of shorthand, which is integrity is doing the right thing when no one else is looking. So integrity is connected to character. Integrity is connected to transparency, which is connected to honesty. Integrity is built around doing the right thing. Now, that's another, I suppose, rabbit hole, which may also, if you're interested, require more explanation in the future. But doing the right thing is so crucial. It is so essential for leaders. And doing the right thing when the pressure is on, when it is tougher to do the right thing. Doing the right thing, as I've said, when no one is looking, is often tougher, because the temptation for a lot of people is to go, no one will ever know. And yet ultimately somebody does know. I believe it echoes out into the ether and we just kind of know. And almost always it's found out anyway. The truth comes out ultimately. And so, how many leaders do you see around who you believe practice are people who have integrity? Are they? Are they people who you think are doing the right thing? Or do they flip flop around? Do they do the right thing behind closed doors? Or is what they're saying something of a platitude to calm the masses, to keep you hooked, to say what you want to hear, to reel you in? Are they really saying what is in alignment with the character, with what they're doing behind closed doors? Are they being transparent? Which, of course, is also connected to integrity. Like I say, all these facets are connected. Then we're going to get here to competence, and in my opinion, a very, very, very interesting one. Competence is, of course, required. I'm a great believer, as I've alluded to already, emotional intelligence, understanding one's emotions, etc. But you need competence in there. You need to be good enough, at least at the job. Some people might call that skill. So without competence, if a leader is incompetent, then it is a bit of a catastrophe. And it doesn't mean to say they have to be an expert or at least an expert in everything. In fact, leadership itself would dictate that someone who is a good leader can dial down the ego and is comfortable enough to be surrounded by a lot of people who know a lot more than the actual leader themselves. The leader's role is to take and synthesize those expert opinions and to figure out what is the way forward. So again, this requires transparency, it requires humility very often from the leader, and it requires the leader to really, really, really listen and to be as unbiased as possible, to glean what is the best way forward, to search in essence for the truth, to drill down as far as they can. And in doing that, they enhance their competence by the power of the people around them. And if you can imagine, the flip side of that would be a leader who was blinkered, who didn't listen, and maybe wasn't that competent in of themselves anyway. And if they're not listening to experts or listening to the wrong ones or having favorites and cliques, then you can see how the whole thing could be skewed, which is why you need leaders, again, being balanced in their emotional approach and really figuring out who's giving them the best information. So the leader also, therefore, as I've alluded to, needs to be aware of their own biases and who they might dismiss in the first instance, or who they might listen to because, oh, this is someone who's like me. Very often, diversity is about differences of opinion, and in a leadership position, that can be essential. Otherwise, you have an echo chamber, do you not? So then what have we got? We have consistency. Consistency. Um, People are creatures of habit. People want, they they really want things to have a routine. Now, everybody's a little bit different. Some people can't stand doing the same thing again and again and again in a task and a job and a role. I mean, I'm one of those people myself. But there are certain things that I need a routine by, whether it's exercise, whether it's meeting friends, whether it's reading, whatever it may be. If I don't have that routine, and again, we can all be a little bit different, we tend to find it a bit more challenging. I do. But consistency, therefore, in terms of leadership, is so much to do with some of the stuff that we've already talked about. Consistency in terms of transparency, consistency in terms of doing the right thing, consistency in terms of communication. And a lot of that is anchored in values. And if the leader is not anchored to the values that they have, which are connected to the word I used already, character, to their character. Their values and beliefs very often overlap hugely. Those values, those beliefs feed into the character of the individual. And if we look at someone who is not consistent in terms of their decisions, in terms of what they say, in terms of who they support or who they attack or what they apparently believe, it is deeply damaging to the people who are the followers, or in terms of countries, the citizens, influenced, impacted by that leader, that leadership, which is why consistency is so important. And it's extremely unsettling. One example of someone who isn't consistent, just to sort of bring us back to day to day, is if you have someone, you've probably known an individual like this who is your best mate one day, hey, and sharing and all the jokes and all the rest of it, and then the next day they're a blazing angry individual for no reason, no reason at all, nothing, and this happens randomly. So there's no routine, there's no pattern to it. It's not as if, oh well, we get the financial results, and today the boss is likely to be angry. There's no reason. It's just this inconsistency, this emotional lability, which is really difficult. I find it difficult to be around people like that generally. If it's the leader, remember, they cast a long shadow, and that change in emotions, that uncertainty can really unsettle people. It does unsettle people. It's as if the ground is moving and they don't know where it is safe to stand. So consistency is so important. And I believe that that is connected to beliefs and values. And as you look around, who do you see? Who might you see? Who could you think of who is inconsistent in that way? And if you can think of people like that or someone like that, how does it feel? How does it make you feel? Probably not great. And if that's the case, it points to consistency being really important. So let's go back to our little graphic, and then we have empathy. So empathy to me is, I mean, I've alluded to it already. Empathy is so important because if you have a leader who doesn't care, then it is easy for them to just step right into dictatorial, totalitarian outlooks and the way they consider the staff in a business or the team in sport, and certainly the population, if they have no empathy, can be extremely cruel. If it is all about them, if they're not transparent and Machiavellian, you don't believe that they're authentic, you're not getting consistency, and if they lack empathy, then we're in big trouble because the leader must empathize with with the group, with the population, with those people around. If not, well, maybe you've seen it. Have you seen a situation where a leader lacks empathy, where they do not seem to care, where you get the feeling that it's them and us, that it's the elite and the plebs, that it is this club that you ain't going to get an invite to and everyone else. And when that happens, there can be various reasons for it, but one reason is often a lack of empathy because the leader and the leadership team itself is othering, in terms of a politician, the population. They are othering everyone else. And that is a recipe for disaster. Now, of course, a leader who's leading a large organization or indeed a country cannot take on board everybody's feelings. No, only Santa can do that. But a leader would burn out. So it's not that you're expecting them to melt into an emotional puddle based on every single issue. But what they have to do, a little bit like listening to the experts, getting that consensus, is to figure out where those hot spots are, where those pinch points are, where those really desperately challenging situations are for people, and then put themselves in those people's shoes. That's the key. Step into the shoes. Imagine you were them. And when you see a leader who doesn't do that, who just looks down and says inauthentically, dishonestly, oh yeah, that's really bad. We need to do something about that. But when you know it is connected to regaining power, pleasing the stakeholders, keeping in charge of a country or a corporation or a team or whatever it may be, you tend to pick up on it, right? Because I come back to people are not stupid. One of the reasons that it is important that leaders have this trust and generate it is because when it is broken, it's almost impossible to get it back. And people pick up on these things, and then they say to themselves, "This is untrustworthy. I cannot trust this individual." So let's then go on to account. No, sorry, accountability. Yes, yes. I'm just going to click off that. Um, Accountability. So let me pull the graphic back up for you. So I'm going here. So decision making, empathy very important, decision making and accountability. You're going to do two of them at once. So empathy crucial. If it goes, we're in a real mess. Decision making and accountability. Now the reason I'm going to talk about both of them at once is because I think they're closely connected. And we've already covered a lot of the aspects of them already. So decision making. If If the leader is inconsistent in terms of character, in terms of integrity, in terms of accessing values and beliefs and being in alignment with them, their character showing up, them being authentic, doing the right thing based on those values, based on those beliefs, then their decision making will be random. It will be all over the place. It will be inconsistent. And when that happens, again, that lack of consistency in terms of decision making, people get absolutely freaked out because they don't know where they are. Now, I've already talked about empathy, and importantly, in empathy, we need to recognize that how would I describe it? That facet of emotional intelligence has to be has to be within the decision making process, because otherwise, as I've said, it's them and us. So when decisions are made, they should be in alignment with character, values, and beliefs, and they should be empathic. It doesn't mean to say that we can always please everyone all the time, or that hard decisions don't have to be made. But how many times have you seen or heard leaders recently going, "Oh, it was a really tough decision," but you just know it wasn't. It was a tough decision, but we decided to close that. It was a tough decision, but we decided to take away that money. It was a tough decision, but we're going to penalise you. It wasn't a tough decision. If it was a tough decision, it would show up, and it would have shown up before that decision was made, because they would have been transparent and saying, "We're struggling with this. This is what's going on," and you would pick it up from the tone. You would pick it up from the demeanour. And when we see that lack of empathy in decision making, it shows up. We are aware of it, I think, a lot of the time. They're fooling no one. These leaders, these corporations who don't care, let's say, about the environment, these politicians who don't care about the citizens, about the population. And so this is linked then, as I've suggested, to accountability. So decision making and accountability, because they sort of run hand in hand, don't they? The leader makes a decision. So the leader makes a decision. And let's just say that what they do is they they hope you forget about it. Have you seen that? Have you seen that happen? Have you seen the leader essentially make a decision and then later on say, "Oh, it was because of I had to do it. It was because of them." No, it wasn't moral and it wasn't ethical, but I had to do it because of market conditions. I had to do it because of shareholders. They absolutely do not own it. And how different would it be if, in making that decision, which hopefully would have been in terms of the consideration before carrying out the result of the decision, empathy would have been in the mix. So empathy hopefully is in the mix. They then make the decision, but either way, they've made the decision. How many people have you seen over the years trying to step away from it and hoping you will ignore it, and then suddenly saying that was then the market forces were different, or there was a political challenge over here. Things are different now. I'm totally different, and I'm doing things differently. But what they don't say, by the way, that's to justify their new belief set, which is pathetic. What they tend not to say, some of them, is, "I made a mistake. I absolutely screwed up. I lost a lot of sleep over that. I feel, to this day, when I think about it, ashamed." How many do you hear saying that? Why do you think they don't? Two reasons, probably. One, maybe they believe that will show weakness. I don't think it will. I think the population, in terms of those looking at the big corporations and also the politicians, are desperate for that level of contrition, are desperate for that level of authenticity, of honesty, of transparency. Desperate for it. And so, when the leader says, "I made the mistake and I am accountable for it," how refreshing is it? But do you see it? And once more, what does that do to trust? And then let's go to what I think is the last one: vision. Yeah, okay. So, vision. Now, vision, in my opinion, is is sometimes the wrong word. it's it's um, it's sometimes the wrong word to use, in the sense that when when we consider the word vision, or somebody saying I have a vision, it sounds a little bit hackneyed, or it does to me. And I think even just using that word can turn people off. But very often, the reason they're turned off is because the vision uses non-specific language. It is woolly, it means nothing. Very often, it's political type language, particularly when it's politicians. It will be great, sunny days again, wonderful, and it doesn't mean anything. People need to hear what that means. They often need more than simply the political type vision. It's going to be great. That's nice. Tell us that. But they need a narrative. They need a story. What's the story? What is involved in this? Tell us, remind us where we are right now. Remind us where we're going to head to. What does it look like? Give some specifics. And how do we get there? And how will you support us along the way? This is the same for sport. It's the same for business. It's the same for politicians. So very often, not only is there no vision, which, by the way, as an aside, is often because there is no core value and belief set which would feed into the narrative, the story, and the vision. So that's one of the reasons very often we don't get visions from a lot of the leaders these days, particularly some politicians. Some we do, but even with that, there's got to be, with the vision, there's got to be some detail. How would we do it? What are the specifics? What have you laid out along the way? What are the stepping stones along the way? Because without that, it is impossible to measure it, which is what a lot of leaders want. They don't want it to be measured. They just want to tell you some nice words and give you some warm feelings and hope you'll forget about it later on. And I say that once more, those days are over. And what does it do to trust? It destroys it. So when we think about those things, when we think about those facets of trust, then I would suggest that one of the things we must look at is to consider, are, this is an old TV program, by the way, if you're old enough to remember, are you being served? are, are you actually being served by the leaders you see around you? Or do you suspect that they are self-serving, that it is about them, and we are not them. We are the others. It is about them. It is about their future. It is about their prestige. It is about their income, in a lot of cases. And and when we get those feelings that this is what leaders are about, the trust, it just isn't there. And so, although we can look at the component parts, which I do believe are important, and there are different versions of that, I just picked that graphic because I thought it was nice, and clear, and pulled out some of the main things. There are other people say there are different facets also to trust, but just think about some of the highlights. Someone who's authentic, they are who they claim to be. That's the main thrust of the character. No one's perfect. Someone who's as transparent as possible. Someone who's therefore honest. Someone who is really practicing integrity. Who will do what they say they're going to do. Who will do it when no one else is looking. Who will do that right thing. Who will communicate clearly. Who won't disguise things. Who will also ensure that the decision making is filled with empathy. They should wrestle with it. They should have an issue with a lot of problems. They should also, when they make those decisions, take accountability for them. I don't think, as I've been speaking, I can't see it. I may have mucked up the channel, but in terms of the input to this feed, but I can't see any comments or chat. So if there are any, and you watching this on the recording, if it records okay, then please comment and share, of course, if you're interested in this, and we can have a bit of discussion, a bit of a discussion about these things. So to finish off, what I would come back to is this overarching idea of trust and the importance of it today. And I would also say that when leaders are not acting with empathy, that it isn't embedded in their decision making process, then we lose. They often gain, but we definitely lose. And recently, in another video, I mentioned in passing the so-called wicked problems. And those wicked problems tend to be in the purview of leadership as opposed to sometimes supervision or management, although it can happen there as well. But it's specifically in leadership because it is complicated. It is difficult. And the idea about a wicked problem is that there is no easy answer. And very often what it boils down to is the least damaging. But if you imagine you had a leader who was genuinely wrestling with those complex, wicked problems, genuinely doing that, then if they were transparent, we should know about it. If they were transparent, we would probably take more to that leader, in a sense, like them more, buy in, trust them more, because they would tell us what the issues were. They would tell us how they felt, and we would pick up on whether that was honest or not. Most of the time, it's difficult to disguise that. And if they even then explained what happened and how they came to that conclusion, because again, you can't please all the people all the time. Neither can you fool all the people all the time, and a lot of them are fooling almost no one these days. But that's another story for another time. So when they explain how they did this thing, how they came to this conclusion, why they made that decision, and we hear how they wrestled with this least worst decision because they were empathic to the needs and fears and hopes and aspirations of the group or groups of people that were affected. How different would that be? It wouldn't be perfect. Of course it wouldn't be. This is not about perfection. It is about, do we trust? Even if we dislike, even if we don't agree with policy, even if we have a difference of opinion, even if we don't particularly like the personality, are they authentic? Are they transparent? Are they people who actually care about the given population that the leader impacts, whatever that population may be? Anyway, I shall leave you with those thoughts. As I've suggested, please comment, like, share, of course, get involved in the discussion. And and I apologise profusely if you have been leaving comments. I haven't seen them. I do apologise for that. But certainly, if you can leave them on the recording of this, if it works out, then I'll endeavour to answer all of them. So I hope you have a thoughtful evening. For the moment, from me, bye for now.